Well, it's certainly an interesting time to be a Titanfall fan. There have been a few leaks recently in regards to Respawn's new single-player FPS title set in the Apex Legends universe, and it has gotten a lot of people wondering whether or not this is actually a clever marketing tactic to release Titanfall 3. And I can't lie, it's gotten me hyped to talk about Titanfall 3 again. I would be absolutely ecstatic if we were to get a Titanfall 3, but whether or not we'll see it anytime soon, or whether or not this theory is true or false, is entirely irrelevant, because that's not the point of today's video. With everyone speculating, I've gotten to see a lot of interesting ideas of what people are expecting from a sequel to the Titanfall franchise, and as you all know, I am a big advocate for Titanfall 3. It is definitely my most anticipated game since 2016, and I don't think anything will ever change that. But there is the potential that Titanfall 3 doesn't live up to the hype. It's been a talking point for nearly 6 years now, so it's completely possible that it doesn't match up to everyone's expectations. It might conform to more modern game practices as people fear. It might not be a worthy successor to one of the best games that came out in the last decade. But I think the pros of having a Titanfall 3 significantly outweigh the cons, and that's part of the reason why I still want to see a Titanfall 3 someday. So the question now is, what does Titanfall 3 need to do in order to be successful? I want to give my predictions, but I'm not going to talk about specific things that need to be included. This isn't the kind of video where I say they gotta have the grappling hook, or they must have class-based Titan loadouts. I'm talking about systems the game is built upon. I'm expecting some pretty serious changes. I believe Titanfall 3 is an opportunity to innovate, and there should be aspects of the game that are completely new and refreshing. But there are certain things that need to stay the same, in my opinion. So here's my list of the 5 things Titanfall 3 must have. Titanfall 3 needs to be a sequel to Titanfall. It's surprising to see so many people think Titanfall 3 would be some sort of Apex Legends spin-off, and I hope it's not. With so many things left underdeveloped at the end of Titanfall 2, it would be detrimental for the Titanfall franchise to suddenly pursue a story set during the events of Apex. The world of Titanfall is unfinished, and so Titanfall 3 needs to spend its time finally concluding the franchise in a way that is satisfying. And for that to happen, the only way for that to happen, is for the game to be able to stand on its own. Titanfall 3 needs to continue the narrative that the franchise has been building up to. And I'm of course talking about the end of the Frontier War. It's such a crucial event within the Titanfall universe, and it still surprises me that we haven't been able to experience it yet. It would be the perfect backdrop to create a complex, character-driven story and delve into the underlying themes of war, tragedy, and loss. Concluding the Frontier War would be the best way to satisfyingly conclude the franchise of Titanfall. Titanfall has been leading up to this massive climactic finale, and Titanfall 3 should be that finale. It should be the story that finally ties off all of the loose ends, and finally lets us get some closure. But Titanfall 3 is also an opportunity to cover more intricate story elements, ones that have been subtly woven into the Titanfall canon but lack any meaningful explanation. Like, who created the Ark? What is the history of the Frontier, Hammond Robotics, and the Titan program? I'm sure many of us want to see the Titanfall universe be expanded upon, and Titanfall 3 is the perfect opportunity. It could even introduce us to some new characters, ones to better show us the many perspectives within the Titanfall universe. Ideally, a campaign that has you experience the end of the Frontier War from both a militia and IMC perspective would be the perfect way to wrap up Titanfall 3. And if Jack Cooper does return, it would be interesting to see how his story plays out too. Seeing him go rogue and accept Blisk's offer to become a mercenary. Maybe he even has a run-in with the Sixth Floor, I don't know. There is potential, so much potential, for Titanfall 3's story to be a satisfying conclusion to the Titanfall trilogy, as long as it's a sequel to the Titanfall story that has already been established, meaning no Apex Legends. When I say that Titan combat needs to improve, it's not necessarily because it was bad, but Titanfall 3, like I said, is an opportunity to innovate, and I feel that it's important to its success to make sure that Titan combat especially feels new and refreshing. I go over things in far more detail with theorists in the Frontier Workshop podcast, so I recommend you see that for more details, but to keep it short, regenerating shields, they need to come back. In Titanfall 2, it was frustrating to be punished for taking permanent damage all the time, and it encouraged a really passive playstyle as a result. It was honestly a step backward from Titanfall 1's design, because now people are too afraid to commit to a fight. The far safer and more effective option would be to sit at medium to long range, spam defensive abilities, and slowly dwindle away at someone's health, and I'm sorry, but Titan combat shouldn't be that way. So regenerating shields, at the very least, need to come back, to at least get people out of that passive playstyle and take more risks. It's much easier to do knowing you can at least take a few shots before taking on real damage. Theorists also helped to design an armor mechanic that would replace the current weak point system. We call it armor stripping. Essentially, parts of a Titan can be destroyed over time to reveal critical weak points. For example, when a Titan drops into the battle, their armor should be able to hold up against damage fairly well. Say it has 50% resistance to gunfire and explosives. As the Titan takes on sustained damage to a certain armor plate, it starts to lose integrity and the armor piece is destroyed. When this happens, the Titan's resistance value decreases and reveals a new exposed weak point. Slowly taking apart a Titan, watching its hull be blown away from rockets and projectiles, and seeing its skeleton become more and more exposed would be way more fun and satisfying if the mechanic was actually a core part of the combat loop. I would love to see some sort of armor stripping mechanic be implemented, even if it's not what I stated exactly. I think it goes without saying, but Titan customization should also be expanded upon. Not a return to form like how it was in Titanfall 1, because I do enjoy the class-based Titan system, but we need more ways to change up the behavior of these Titans. Like, what if each class had an Atlas, Ogre, and Strider variant? A different ability for us to switch out. Nothing crazy, of course. Each Titan will still have a definitive playstyle. I don't want to see a Ronin with a thermite launcher and vortex shield dashing around the map, but more options to adjust the behavior of abilities would be greatly appreciated. Theorists and I also discussed pilot interactions such as 3-stage rodeo, which aims to combine the best elements from Titanfall 1 and 2 to create a more dynamic rodeo system. There is also our discussion on chiclets and balance changes, so again, I encourage you to check out our full podcast, link in the description. I hope Titan combat does change, because I don't want to jump into Titanfall 3 feeling like I've played it all already. It is definitely one area that needs some serious rethinking if Titanfall 3 wants to hold the attention of its veteran fans. Titanfall is known for its movement. It's fast, responsive, and incredibly versatile, giving players the ability to pull off some pretty amazing stuff. And I think Titanfall 2 features some of the best movement mechanics in any movement shooter I've played to date. It is part of Titanfall's identity, and I think we can all agree on that. Titanfall 3 should look to improve upon these mechanics without a doubt, but what I don't want to see is Titanfall's movement be dumbed down in order to appeal to a larger audience of players who are used to more slowed down tactical shooters. I'm sure just imagining that thought makes you repulse, but it is a possibility, because there is a larger audience of players who enjoy that slower, more methodical playstyle. But Titanfall is an incredibly unique experience, and part of the reason why is due to the movement. Without it, Titanfall's entire design becomes compromised. Titanfall 3 should aim to improve upon the experience by delivering more of what we loved about the last two games. How about pilot kits that grant passive bonuses to your movement? Like one that increases your wall run distance, or one that gives you the ability to triple jump. And of course, give us more movement based tacticals. Grapple and Stim are by far two of the most used tacticals in Titanfall 2, so give us more tacticals like them. How about a dash ability, or thrusters that propel us forward? Hell, give us a jetpack! If Titanfall 3 wants to be successful, then it needs to build upon the mechanics that made the franchise successful in the first place. So keep the momentum, double down on the things players loved about the movement, and don't try to change it. How do I put this? The AI in Titanfall 2 is atrocious. It's really bad. Enemies don't have specific roles to fill in combat, and they're just straight up stupid. There are clips of grunts running directly into walls. This is one area of Titanfall's design that needs some serious work, because it is honestly my biggest complaint about the Titanfall 2 campaign. The one thing I can suggest is to create enemies with defined roles. Enemies that force the player to move, that get us to exploit unique weaknesses, that get us to think about positioning, prioritization, and different ways to approach encounters. More enemies, each with different roles and weaknesses, designed to keep the player accountable for their actions, will create a more engaging experience. Ticks are perfect examples. Their AI is very simple. Find the pilot and blow up. But despite the simplistic nature of their AI, ticks are responsible for holding the player accountable. When you hear those ticks approaching, then you know that it's time to move, because if you don't, you will die. It's as simple as that. Ticks, as silly as it may sound, keep the player accountable for their actions and keeps the player engaged. There needs to be more enemies like the tick. Riot specters with shields to push the player. Anti-pilot troops that evade incoming projectiles and set up traps along wall running paths. enemies that buff units around them or summon stronger units to support, aerial units that harass the player from afar, oppressive units that leap towards the player and cover the ground in AoE attacks, forcing the player to engage with the movement that makes Titanfall so fun. This type of enemy design keeps the player engaged, and gets them thinking about what enemies to prioritize, how to engage large groups of enemies, how to use their movement to reposition, attack, retreat. Now, not every enemy needs to challenge the player. Grunts still have their place, but they should be more like cannon fodder. They should be there to support those larger and more powerful enemies and simply offer up something for the player to shoot, because shooting things is fun, and it can get very exhausting if every single enemy type feels like some sort of puzzle the player needs to solve. So grunts still definitely have their place. Titanfall's AI needs a lot of work for Titanfall 3 to be successful, and it's one area I personally hope gets some serious attention, because the reason the campaign didn't really engage me is because the enemies didn't engage me. But hopefully these suggestions give you guys an idea of how the AI can be drastically improved. Titanfall is about interstellar warfare between two opposing sides, one fighting for order and control of the frontier, whilst the other fights to free it. The first Titanfall had a harsh, dirty, military look that I personally loved. You could attach yourself to the world and everything felt believable. The characters had depth and it felt enticing, like the game was trying to pull you in. Then Titanfall 2 comes around and adopts a more colourful, vibrant, arcadey feel, which is fine, sure, but I didn't like it as much because I believed it didn't do the themes of the game any justice. Part of the reason why was due to the incredibly bright oversaturation and horrible film grain, which kinda makes the game look ugly. But more so, it's because a lot of the atmosphere has changed and Titanfall 2 doesn't feel as grand and as believable as Titanfall 1 did. One of my favourite things about the original Titanfall was the spectacle. The map design, the sounds, the skybox, everything worked together in order to create an immersive experience that you just don't get in Titanfall 2. Take one of my favourite maps for example, Boneyard, a military research facility positioned in a desert valley with rotting carcasses, flying wildlife and massive behemoth-like creatures that loomed above everything. Boneyard is an awesome map, one that fully captivates you and immerses you in the grand spectacle of Titanfall's universe. It feels like a living, breathing world. It feels grounded and believable. Take another map for example, Demeter. This map is beautiful and perfectly encapsulates what Titanfall is all about. The map is expansive, the colours are just gorgeous, and above everything looms a massive space battle that actually changes as the game progresses. Demeter is another map that fully captivates you in the universe of Titanfall, and I really miss that in Titanfall 2. No map in the sequel feels as grand, as spectacular, as immersive as Titanfall 1 did. Maybe it's not so much about the art style, and more about the feeling the game gives you. Titanfall 1 felt immersive, and I guess I kinda missed that. But looking back on the original Titanfall, part of its visual appeal was also how realistic it felt. Something as simple as ammo pouches being strapped onto the Titan's chassis, that was really cool. You could see where Titan stored those extra magazines and it made you think, yeah, I could see the military doing that. But the Titans in Titanfall 2 don't have them. And I guess it's just the subtle details that make things believable. I really miss the old art style of the original Titanfall. I miss that feeling I got when playing it. If Titanfall 3 wants to captivate its fans again, then it needs to return to a more grounded art style. These days, it seems like a cartoonish art style is more of a gimmick anyway, and doesn't actually aim to accomplish anything. So I seriously hope that Titanfall decides to stray away from this trend. So what do you think? What other things do you want to see be introduced in Titanfall 3? Do you agree with what I said? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, this was a fun video to make. Don't forget to check out the Frontier Workshop podcast, like and subscribe, and there will be plenty more Titanfall content coming in the future. Until next time, this is Agent Mav, signing off.